Welcome, welcome, welcome. And thank you for joining me, Krampus, as we look at Story Times with Krampus. And today's book, the continuation of The Krampus and the Old Dark Christmas by Ridenour. Today's part of the story comes from Pierre Fontainebleau's Trapp and Schmidt-Sally. Germany's Nicht Ruprecht also has vocal variants in neighboring countries under German culture influence. In Alsace, once German region of France, and across the Rhine and Palatinate, Nach Ruprecht blends into Pierre Fodre or Father Whip or Hans Trapp. Both characters are similar in appearance and perform roles identical to Ruprecht. But Hans Trapp, also Hans von Trapp or Hans Toth, actually happens to be associated with historical knight and nobleman Hans von Torre, whose story is worth relating. In the late 1400s, von Torre engaged in a dispute over lands with the abbot of a nearby Benedictine monastery. During the feud, the noble demanded a river to cut water off to Mosaic lands in question, eventually tearing down the dam and causing devastating floods in nearby towns of Westburg. As a result of this, the further hostilities, von Trother was summoned to Rome by Pope Alexander VI. The knight refused to appear, writing to the Berger Pope and accusing him of vague indecencies. In turn, he was excommunicated and henceforth referred to in local legend as the Black Knight. Folklore associated with the devil, dark arts, and even cannibalism. And he was thought and incorporated as a villain into legend associated with the town of Don, what is said to have miraculously appeared, where a maiden landed after a jump from a cliff. Pursued by would-be rapist von Totha, she leapt from the cliff, but she survived, thanks to the miraculous effort of ballooning skirts. In Switzerland, where Pierre Ferdinand is known in French regions, German speakers refer to a character known as Schmidt-Sally. His appearance is much like that of Ruprecht's, though unlike the solitary German companion, as much he may appear in groups of 2 or 3, as well as individually originally going by the name Betschmali. Sometime in the early 1900s, the name morphed into its current form, which folk etymology derives from schmutz or grime, referring to the figure's often ash-smeared face. Zarotplit. In the Low Countries, Zarotplit, Black Peter, fills the role, appearing either singly or in multiples, traditionally toting a whip and a bag, and dressed in garb of a Renaissance courier. Zorsa Pete, also normally schmaltzy Black Peter, especially as a black amour, and is literally the creation not explicitly identified as Zarth Pete. The character's first appearance comes in 1850 in St. Nicholas on Zingrach, St. Nicholas and his servant. By schoolteacher Jan Zipperman in the book, St. Nicholas and servant arrived in Holland via steamboat, having begun their journey for, well, reasons not entirely clear, in Spain. Reenactment of this seafaring arrival to Amsterdam has become an ongoing part of Zalpiet tradition, with Dutch television annually broadcasting the event, now featuring an entire crew of Peets of varying ranks. Hoofdpiet, head Piet, Rumpelpiet, etc. Understandably, the radically changed figure today is an object of countless angry editorials, cautious defenses, and finger pointing and demonstrations. Various revolutionist attempts to seek to amortir the damage, ignoring the character's potentially curly wig. It has been suggested that prior to his service to St. Nick, Pete had been a chimney sweep, a job that primarily darkened his skin. Another defense points to legends associated with St. Nicholas, in which the saint frees a slave from the emperor of Babylon and, well, returns him to his home. Though no explanation is provided for Pete's subsequent servitude with Nicholas. Increasingly, Pete portrayed as more of a companion or friend of St. Nick than a slave, and, well, is given the task of handing out gifts rather than brandishing a whip. For several decades, alternative Petes made up a variety of colors, other than black, have also been trolled out, but this compromise is not really caught on, and providing little to satisfy either defenders or detractors of the tradition. Now, frightful stories for better children. Whether shaped by literary, folkloric, or esoteric elements, the idea of threatening figure paired with giving of rewards clearly means pragmatic need felt by parents worldwide. Boogeyman, more authentically described in Germany as Kinderschwafler, child terror figure, can ensure that children say their prayers, mind their manners, or go to sleep on time. It is literally like me, Krampus, or other dark companions. Begun as just a anamorphous and changeable boogoos, sometimes spoken but really never actually seen, evolving perhaps from a vague, shadowy boogeyman, like Schwarzmann, black man, in radically neutral sense. The figure was only visualized with any specificity once the custom of impersonating a figure was adopted. His face might naturally be blackened, and, while further obscured with a dark, false beard. Outfitted with rough, darker clothes that he might be at hand, he would be handed a whip and bag as attributes of his punishing function. In, well, more Catholic lands, where the church's iconography was stronger, the Krampus, me, where my parents came more closely approximated the devils. And of caution where the created would naturally come from the resources readily available to alpine farmers, goat horns, and animal hides. I assumed this modern form in the mid 19th century, with a mold of child rearing the Germans called Zebruk und Pech, sugar, bread, and whip. Was in full force like St. Nicholas Day. Christmas was exploited with its educational strategy in mind. Children's Christmas gifts, with only at this point in history transformed from small tokens like gingerbread, oranges, and sweets to, well, the more durable keepsakes we know today. Needing to be edifying or Christological, Bibles and books that guarded the child's behavior were therefore popular choices. Appearing in 1854 and whimsically illustrated by its author, Heinrich Hoffmann, Der Strichwer and Grumpeter, takes its name from a monstrous titled character, supportingly wild unkempt hair, grotesquely long nails, and, well, it's Pagnus children who play with matches, refuse to eat, suck their thumbs, torment animals, or commit other childish misdemeanors. They meet with the ghastly fates, providing cautionary examples of delicious, startled delight in others' mistakes. The book is still printed today, and over the years it inspired an 1891 translation by Mark Twain, a 1995 film rendering the story as a ballet. Parodies like the WW2 era British punk cabaret artist Tiger Lily's Stockholm Peter, Hoffman created a volume as a Christmas gift for his 3-year-old, with a simple text and design specifically geared to young readers' development level, and angelic Christkind is depicted on the opening pages. And the text explicitly presents the book as a Christmas book earned by good behavior. Now we'll look at the roots of the Kinderschriftsteller. The tradition of German Kinderstreck goes back much further, of course, than Hoffman's book, or, well, even me, or Raphael's figures. Embedded in the German language, with its origin often unknown past, are a number of spooks intended to aid in the discipline of children. Children fretting over their bedtime would not only be terrorized by the Sandman, but also menaced the Nachab, night raven, or Nachtboch, night ghost. The pole man and pole hole drag naughty children off into the swamps, while the wazer men, or half-fish shamrock, prey upon children foolishly endangering themselves near water. More all-purpose boogeymen go by the variety of names: Manzedo Mampres, the Baz Busserman, Bussmann, and the previously mentioned Schwarzerman. Germans have names for things they love. In German-speaking Bern, Switzerland, another cautious figure has memorialized in the cautious 16th century fountain, although intended behind the installation of is lost for time. The Kastelfrenbern child eater fountain depicts an ogre munching on the head of a child while holding a bag of squirming victims in reserve. While it's been theorized that the scene may represent classical motif of Satan devouring his children, it is also suggested that the depiction may simply show a fearsome character impersonated in local carnival festivities. Supporting a carnival figure theory are images representing the broadsheets typically handed out at 16th and 17th century carnival celebrations across German speaking land. Also, making his home in Bern, artist Hans Winder in 1520 produced a woodcut Der Kinderstrick depicting a particularly nasty ogre gobbling a child. Like Bern Fountain, this monster shown in consuming the child's heard first and carrying several more in a sack. But Woodruff's illustration bests the statue with grisly detail, trickling blood and a pile of feces dripping from the particularly panicked infant. About 80 years later, the subject was still popular, as demonstrated by another broadsheet by German artist Lorenz Schultz. His Kindersfest shows a similar scene staged at the door of a home where children seek safety from a cannibalistic ogre in the arms of their mother. Accompanying text drives home the didactic intent with the mother warning her children. So, if you do not want to be quiet right now, I will give you to him. Therefore, be silent and still came in the house, so that he will not find you crying outside. Still another broadsheet from a few decades, Der Märchensack, Man with a Sack, by Bavarian artist Abraham Brock Sr., features a menacing figure with a bag stuffed full of squirming tots who, pursuing a frightened boy, likewise fleeing into a doorway and the comfort of his mother. The child snatchers can't help but remind us of December's dark companions, especially as they show interest in pursuing bad children. In fact, there's no reason to suppose Necroper is imagined in the 17th century would have been much different than Bach's Der Min dam Sack, similarly in many ways to other woodcuts. A final broadsheet from the 1750 does specifically link with me via the character of Frau Purja and the Purchin, elements of me genealogically to be later discussed. Holding the distaff of flax spinner, a well-known symbol of Purja, this witch-like crone terrifies children seeking mother's comfort again in the home's doorway. On her back she carries young unfortunates, stuffed into a back basket of the type used by me. The name of the figure, Brandsbursch, gives us the further clues. Burst is an alternate spelling of Purja or perched. The prefix Butzt is a word for spook or boogeyman. This Frau Purja has led us back to witches and to the bottom presents cured by Italian inquisitors, and the mention of the first paragraphs. We are finally ready to cross the borders into the Australian Alps and encounter me as I live today.